We have some of the highest taxes in the entire country, from property taxes to sales tax to motor vehicle tax to tax on top of a tax. I think the real question is, what are your plans for tax reduction and in any specific areas? And so at that point,
well, God bless everyone here today, and it is certainly an honor to be here. So thank you for your engagement. Thank you for your prayers for our state. And Cindy and I are honored to be here with you. So certainly our nation turns 250 years old this week or this year. And why were we birthed? Because of taxes and the freedom of. So isn't it interesting? You mentioned taxes on taxes. You realize that we pay tax on the tax when you buy fuel, right? So it is a tough situation. So I will share with you that actually that's why Cindy and I are here, because in 2017, when my state rep supported a 32% tax increase in the 2018 budget, I got a little miffed at that. I did the American thing, and I went to Facebook and complained about it. Be careful, because that's why I'm here today. So much so that as I began to educate my constituents, and I had Facebook literally to monitor what my kids were saying and doing, and that's it. Had 300 Facebook friends July 2nd of 2017, and it took off like wildfire because overall people don't really pay attention to state government. We pay attention to Fox News and what's taking place in D.C., but we're not paying attention to state government. And all these problems that we're going to talk about today, they originate from Springfield. So this whole situation on taxes, your property taxes, you've seen your property taxes continue to climb. Well, the main driver of that, 60 to 70%, is obviously our public schools. So that's why we need to be running for school board. That's why we need to be showing up at some meetings and kind of understanding where the money's being spent. But here's the deal. Honestly, it's not all the school's fault. What's happened over the years is that state government comes out with these mandates. They tell the schools, well, you've got to do this starting January 1st of next year. All public school, high schools have to have 2 foreign language classes. Most in small communities so far just have 1, and they struggle with that. So that means they're going to have to hire an additional teacher or hire some firm to come in online. Takes money, but the state's not going to pay for that. Or the state comes out with an amazing program, and we fund it, and then about 5 years into it, we yank the funds, but the public schools decide, no, we want to keep this program, so they have to pay for it. That's why our property taxes continue to increase. Set aside the fact that, all of the new building, the gyms, the football fields, the baseball fields, that's driving your taxes up too. So my belief is that there is so much waste in our budget. So 2017, when I wanted to run for state, my answers won't all be this long, but this is a big, big subject. 2017, when I got tipped off at the state tax increase, Illinois budget was $32 billion. Today, Pritzker is proposing a $56 billion budget. So all that increase, yet we still have problems, right? So the state's influence of finding this waste and all this abuse within our budget and then reappropriating it, spending it wisely. I believe there's going to be close to the tune of possibly $10 billion there to reappropriate. And we intend to work with our public schools to the extent that they will not have to continue raising their levies and their property taxes. I want to see at least a 90-day suspension of the gas tax. We need relief, and we need it now. I want to see it's the state's responsibility to begin to push down and tamper down on utility costs. And I'm telling you, if we do our job responsibly and we start putting people in charge of some of these agencies who are business-minded people who will get things done, we're going to cut a lot of waste. There's a lot of money being spent that we are getting nothing from. We're going to cut that out of the government, And I believe we will restore confidence in our government, and I believe that we will begin to show to the people of Illinois, Indiana is running a responsible government. That's why they can come here and say, hey, Chicago Bears, we have $1 billion, come on over here. Illinois doesn't have that because our governor's wasted it. So kind of an answer to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Now, the next question. Yes. These are your questions, okay?
Testing. Thank you. Yes. Even though I do happen to represent thousands of women across the nation who've been injured badly by abortion, this is a local question. What can be done to stop abortion in Illinois?
Well, here's the deal. I'm going to be honest with you. When I get elected, I'm going to be in the super minority. You know what that means? That means that Springfield can operate without any Republican being there. So we've got to be wise with our actions. We've got to be wise with what we can do and realize what we can legislate and what we can't. That's why this next run that we're running, if you've been watching my message, we're talking about affordability, we're talking about safety, getting rid of the Safety Act, getting rid of sanctuary state policy, and we're talking about education. Because we have got to come together. You've seen what's been fast-tracked over the last 7 years regarding that issue, and we've just been steamrolled. So therein is the proof that we have got to restore people's confidence in government. We've got to bring people to the table to make life more affordable, to make life safer, and to fix our broken school system. That's going to take a little bit of time. I believe it's my goal, it's my desire to bring unity and understanding all across Illinois. No more divisiveness. No more this party line. We are Americans first, and we're Illinoisans. And then I believe when we sit around the table and we start coming up with solutions to how to make life more affordable in Illinois. Because here's the deal. When we win in November, it's going to send shockwaves across this state. It's going to send shockwaves across our nation. And here's the deal. Many times, elected officials, when they show up for work, I'm not saying all, but many times I've witnessed this, they kind of sometimes forget about campaign promises. They forget about their messaging. They forget about their job of representing, and they're always focused on one thing. It's re-election. So our friends in Chicago area, where it's all packed and people don't know who their state representatives and senators are, it's going to be my job every day to message them. Hey, constituent in Lincoln Park, your state senator and your state representative won't come and sit at the table because I want to roll the gas tax back, because I want to make life more affordable for you, but they won't come and show up. And by the way, here's their number. You need to give them a call. That's what we're going to do to get people to come to the table. That's how we're going to fix this immediate burden of living here and surviving and staying. And then we're going to have to develop those relationships that in time, then we can talk about the rest of the stuff that you and I care about. We're going to have to be patient and pray about that.
Panel, next question.
All right. Have you found Illinois media to lean hard left? What's your experience been with the media so far?
So, Illinois media leaning hard left. 4 years ago, absolutely. I couldn't get every issue that I would come and talk about. There were children that died under DCFS care 4 years ago. So I went to Springfield in front of the DCFS headquarters and did a press conference. It was beautiful information. I proposed legislation. I asked for changes. The first question out of the media's mouth had to do with our president. And just trying to push me in a corner. I was so frustrated. I just said, this press conference is over with. If you guys can't figure out and understand that children are dying under our state's care, under our taxpayers' dollars, something is wrong. So I struggled with that and fought against that for that entire campaign. But I want to tell you something. It's changed. It has changed today. As you know, and I want to thank everyone here for your prayers over our loss and your encouragement. So President Trump called me during the time that we were at home. He encouraged us to stay in the race. And he said something that at first troubled me. He said, you got to use this. You use this to further your purpose. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to use this. I didn't say that, but I'm thinking it. But here's what happened, and he knew because he's experienced this. By the time we got back on the road in January, we had about a 2.5, 3 month downtime of just praying and fasting and being with our family and friends. A lot had changed. I changed. But then something big happened that was a blessing. Chicago media calls us up, and for the first time ever, on every network up there, and it went nationwide, they said, tell us your story. And because of the fact that some things in me had changed, not anything we're talking about here, but just my compassion for people who are dying and people who are losing their lives and people who are getting kicked out of their homes and people can't afford to pay their bills. There was a compassion level that picked up, and Chicago allowed me to tell my story. And I'm going to be honest with you, to this point today, yesterday, we had a press conference in Springfield where I called for the complete repeal of the Safety Act. Those questions that try to trip me up, they were not there. Because people in Chicago today, they're suffering financially. They're feeling the pinch. They were not 4 years ago. So yeah, there's been a shift. I think that's a lot to do with your prayers, with this realization that we need change. So it is different today than it was 4 years ago.
You just mentioned the Safety Act. Could you explain to us what that really is and what your opinion is of that and how that is affecting Illinois?
So the Safety Act, I was that showed up in 2020. As a matter of fact, I was getting ready. We were all in COVID, as you know. I sued J.B. Pritzker for the COVID extension, and we won that lawsuit. We were able to go around the state after July of 2020 and tell churches to open their doors and tell businesses to open up. Nobody's shutting you down. And then a little bit later, I was escorted out of the first day of session on special session because I wouldn't put my mask on and just standing up for the people. But then I chose to come back because they changed the rules where you had to have your mask on, and I wanted to represent my people. And after a week-long session, about $1 million extra of your money to have it in the Boss Center instead of the Capitol. The last day, I was getting ready to go be sworn in as a senator. So I cast the last no vote as a state representative against the Safety Act. But this all started as it started innocently, as all of these bills do. It started because in Chicago, their jails were overfilled, they were overcrowded. And, we know now that their district attorney, state's attorney up there was doing nothing, but they claim that we can't keep up with everything, and we've got people in here that stole a candy bar that, really just need to have an ankle bracelet on. They don't need to be sitting in jail, and they don't need to be paying a bail to get out. That's how this started. And in the early days, I stood up on the House floor and I said, I disagree with all of this, it's wrong, but you know what, Chicago representative, if you say this is a problem in your district, I'll support it. You know what's best for your area. But leave the rest of the state alone. Exempt any county less than 500,000 population. Just leave us alone. Well, that certainly wasn't in the cards, and it morphed into what it is today. That most of these shootings, Jonathan Bartholomew, the police officer that was shot and killed at the hospital, the person that shot him not only was here illegally, but had been released 3 other times. He should have been in jail. So that's the issue, and that's the problem with the Safety Act. Our governor blames all of that on these judges, but the law dictates what the judges decide. Unless the judge can pinpoint someone specifically that person is a danger to, they have to let them go. So the Safety Act is there is no room for even rework now. It has got to be repealed, and common sense states and dictates that these people, so the bill that I proposed, at least without repealing the Safety Act, simply said that if the judge sees that, just thinks that this person is a danger, that they'll be put back in jail. If your ankle monitor, sometimes the batteries go dead and nobody ever comes and checks on it. If your battery is dead for 2 hours, then a law enforcement officer must come and check on this person and then take them immediately within 48 hours in front of a judge. And if you skip bail or if you repeat something, then you are definitely back into jail immediately. So that's some of the stuff that we're dealing with right now. This must be repealed completely. The sanctuary state, sanctuary city policies, you don't realize that, but that's a vacancy sign. That's saying, hey, come to Illinois. Good thing is the border's closed, so we're not seeing as much influx right now. And then we have what's called the Trust Act. And that is the act that, a governor can tell state and local police officers that you cannot work with federal officers. That's why ICE was in Chicago, because there was a problem. J.B. Pritzker said, state and local police, you cannot try to look or find the most dangerous criminals. And then so the federal government came in to uphold the law because state wouldn't. All that needs, not overhauled, it needs removed, and it will be under our administration.
So just to be sure, that has to come through a legislative act and not an act through the governor's office.
Okay, very good question. Let me tell you something. The state of Illinois, the governor of Illinois, has the most expansive authority than any governor in the nation. We'll see if they change that before November. Right now, a governor of Illinois can issue executive order, just like our president does. It's not going to say you're not going to get pushback, but you can issue executive order that takes effect immediately. The governor of Illinois controls the purse strings. So you ask, well, I've heard that we spent $2.5 million in illegals in Chicago for housing and insurance and food. Where'd that money come from? J.B. Pritzker reached into the pot and decided to repurpose it. A governor of Illinois can do that. Now somebody's going to get shorted. Probably our schools. At the end of this fiscal year, our schools that 2.5's got to be accounted for somewhere. So schools or townships or municipalities, they might get shorted. You know why they might get shorted? Because they have the ability to raise levies, to increase your taxes. So that's what JB's doing. He's putting the responsibility back on us, so he can stand as he did 2 months ago at the State of State address and say, school districts we've lowered our amount of money that the state's giving them, and he has, but that's why your property taxes have skyrocketed. He's pulled it, and if schools want to keep doing what they're doing, they have to ask for more money. J.B. Pritzker also said, we have an all-time high graduation rate in our high schools. Do you know why he was able to say that? Because public school can't flunk or hold anyone back anymore. So you just push them out the door. That's why 70% of the high school graduates in the state of Illinois, per Illinois State Board of Education's website, cannot read, write, and do math at grade level. And in Chicago, it's 90%. That's why they're fed up. So and the final prong of the three-pronged authorities of the governor is that every agency, Department of Education, Corrections, IDOT, every agency there is, the governor appoints the chair and the board. It's going to be all new people, and hopefully a lot of you here with common sense that want to fix Illinois, want to fix it immediately.
Well, sharpen up your pencil and get ready to make those appointments. Alan?
What are your most common questions that you're hearing on the campaign?
Common questions: can you really win? So can you really win? Seriously. Amen. Guys, listen. It's not impossible, and it is possible. But faith without works is dead, right? So, I just want to put something into perspective. 2.5 million FOID card holders. People are frustrated at their Second Amendment rights. Those numbers right there alone, even if you were to say 75% maybe think like us and the other 25 don't, there's a winning ticket. The church, homeschool, I can go on and on and on, but you know what's happening? People aren't voting. There are 10 million eligible people in Illinois to vote. Only 70% of them are registered. So in 2022, there was a 43% turnout. That means 43% of the 70% are all that showed up and voted. Guys, listen, there's a recipe to show up and beat this, but we must make sure all of our friends are registered to vote, and we must, 45 days prior to November 3rd, get them into your church, but you also get them into the polling place. Get them to vote. The numbers are there. We can win if we show up and vote. Period.
That's a great answer. And I think I can state confidently for my friends that all of us endorse more Christians getting engaged and voting for candidates who support righteousness.
Thank you.
One thing that we formally have done here at the church is, I'm a deputy registrar, that we will be available to register people for voting, and Pastor just said that that's okay to do it for this upcoming election as well.
So a quick story, we just came from a Christian daycare, and I'm not going to say where it was at. It was far enough away I can repeat this story. But it was a Christian daycare, so, a privately funded organization, but they were, connected with the state so they could receive state funds. So they wanted me to show up so they could tell me what I already knew about how they were struggling because the state wasn't paying what they promised they'd pay. But this lady did her homework. The school superintendent was there. The junior college president was there, and there were several other people in attendance. As we're talking about the exact same thing. One lady over here said to the school, "You need to be registering people at your school." The superintendent said, "Well, we're not going to get involved in politics." And the lady doubled down on him, and she said, "We're talking about voting here." And he said, "Well, yeah, you're right. You're right. So listen, when you guys go home this evening and you go to church on Sunday or whenever, there is no reason we shouldn't be registering people out back to vote. There is no reason when the pastor stands up here and preaches, he or she shouldn't be reminding you to get out and vote when the time comes. You don't have to endorse, but I will tell you one other story. Is everybody here familiar with Pastor Corey Brooks, the rooftop pastor in Chicago? He stood up on stage Sunday morning and endorsed us. Said, the church can't endorse, but I can. You need to vote for him. So there is movement taking place in Chicago.
We're seeing a great move of God around the country, and this is a part of it. Next question, panel.
All right. Well, you mentioned that you increased in this season passion, and I do think that is a Christian virtue that maybe sometimes we can overlook when we get too justice-centered. So this question speaks into that. So, what's your stance on sanctuary cities and how you plan to handle immigration, maybe through the lens of passion and justice?
So, 4 years ago, I would have said, load everybody up and get them out of here. And now that, we have to admit and we have to realize, and this is something that I've learned recently, that, guys, there's a lot of people who are here, albeit illegally, that they have nowhere to go. There's been children born. There's been people who have been out of their country for 7, 8 years. And can you imagine sending them back home and reacclimating them? Just first of all. Second of all, many of them are working, and you know as well as I do, we have a work shortage anyway. We must be going after the dangerous criminals. We are not doing that today. If ICE isn't up there, we're not doing it because J.B. Pritzker is not allowing state, I've heard it from sheriff deputies, he's not allowing state and local officials to do anything about it. If you're here illegally, you can drive, you can vote, you can do everything. You can work, because you get this little card from the DMV. I don't know what it looks like, but it's a driver's license, but it's more of an ID card. And I hear many times from various deputies across the state that when they pull someone over and they get this card, they don't know what to do because they know if they act on it, give them a ticket, do whatever, they could get in trouble. And many times they just have to let them go. So we must get these dangerous, violent offenders. That's why all these shootings are taking place, because we are not removing these people. And then in my opinion, we need to do something to try to help fast track naturalization for these people so they can become tax-paying citizens, all while we are removing the most dangerous people. Because let's be honest, rounding everybody up, you need to consider the cost of how that comes, because they are integrated into our society, whether we like it or not. So figuring out a way, giving some kind of a moratorium, a year, 2 years, you have this time to come, fill your paperwork out, and that information's already available, but guess what? The Secretary of State's office won't share it. They won't even share it with state police, they won't even share it with other state organizations. But the governor can turn the heat up on that and change that and say, you've got such and such a time to figure this out, and then after that, you will be considered illegal, and then we act on that. So that's an initial thought and a concept, and that's some stuff, I want to hear from you about, because ultimately I'm, representing the people, but that's something that I've considered.
So, a lot of people get confused on that subject because it ends up being broad. They just say illegal immigration, because there is the segment that is DACA, right? People that pay taxes, pay payroll taxes, file their taxes every year, that are absolutely documented, but aren't here legally. Children that came in with their parents that had no choice. So we have two separate things on that, and I think maybe that's where that subject gets demonized. So do you see those as different in that? Like the ones that are here undocumented, right, that don't pay taxes, versus the ones that are actually been paying in the system their whole life?
But even with the DACA, there's nothing being done with them. I mean, why aren't we fast helping them become, they're just accepted, you were born here, so here you are. No, they need to become citizens. And that's the only way this works. Somebody does not need to be here if you're not a citizen or not working toward becoming a citizen. So to your point, yes, you are correct. Because don't forget, $2.5 billion of your money went to feed, house, clothe people are here illegally. I'm governor, that ends. There's nothing. Nothing's going out to anybody, because we've got senior citizens, we've got veterans, we've got people here in Illinois that are hurting and suffering. Our citizens will come first, and I think that will help flush some of this out too.
When you're governor, what would be the top 3 policy changes you would make?
Well, first and foremost is this budget. No one has any idea. The people that pass it every year, the governor, it's 5,000 pages. It's going to grow to $56 billion. Everybody remember when gambling was legalized, we weren't going to have any more money for schools because that was going to take care of everything. No one even knows where that money goes today. Just a few years ago, marijuana was legalized. No more mental health issues. What does J.B. Pritzker do every time there's some shooting or violent activity? He throws another $80 million in the name of mental health care. And at this meeting this morning, we had some mental health specialists that were wondering where the money was at and how they could get help to do their jobs. So, first and foremost, maybe you've heard of I introduced a DOGE program. Everybody knows what that is. DOGE kind of didn't work the way we wanted it to in D.C. My DOGE process is figuring out, finding this waste, fraud, making everything transparent. You get your hands, and I've seen it, I've printed it out, you've probably seen it in the House and the Senate, this 5,000 pages of budget. It's all sentences, and many of it is decades-old legislation of spending that maybe was authorized in 2020 or 1970, and it's never been changed. So that budget needs to look like your and I's budget for our business, for this church, for your home, and we need to break it down. And when we do that, I'm telling you, there's going to be a lot of money, a lot of funding that's going to be exposed that we can then redirect. And after that, it's putting the agency heads and the committees in place. It's the governor also places trustees to our 4-year universities, and then going immediately to a complete suspension for 90 days or whatever of the gas tax. Anything that we can do immediately to begin shutting off money to sanctuary cities or having an immediate impact on your bottom line will be some day one agendas.
The question from the audience here is, can we change the gun restrictions?
Well, anyone that knows me knows there's no one here more pro-life or more pro-Second Amendment than I. So there will be no new legislation that will be signed. I guarantee you that. But again, we're going to have to work because we are going to be in the super minority. And we're going to have to work to fix some of these other problems before we can deal with these issues. We're going to have to earn the trust of Chicago and their representatives and their legislators. Because if we go in guns and blazing, does anybody remember Bruce Rauner? Do you remember the first thing that he did? Day one. Showed up, went to war against Mike Madigan, and he went to war against the unions. And what happened? Nothing. Nothing to the point that towards the end of his tenure, he kind of switched on us and did some things we don't like, just so he could hang his hat on something. So you're going to have to be patient. We're going to have to pray. You're going to have to work with him. We've got a long. If I show up and go to immediately working on some of this stuff, that wall's just going to get wider and thicker. We have to realize that right now, where we've gotten in the last 7 years, we can't afford to live here. We're not safe, and our schools are failing. Those have got to be the three priorities that we focus on first. Then we'll move into the other issues.
Let me just interject here. For those that may not be aware of the term super minority, Illinois has the same legislative setup as the federal government does of executive, judicial, and the congressional. Right now, we are at the other end of the super minority where the opposing party represents the governor's office, both houses, and the judicial. So coming in, you're going to be 1 against 2 on the Senate and the House side.
Well, yes, you are correct. And to the point that, so let's take a school board. The school board has 7 members. You have to have at least 4 to show up and do business. If the other 3 don't show up, and you got 4, you can conduct business. That's the ratio in the House and the Senate. If the Republicans, remember when Texas, when they all walked out, and some of them came to Illinois? Well, if the Republicans did that in Illinois, well, they can still conduct business because there's so many of them. So that's the issues we're dealing with.
Texas was mentioned, I'll just say, it takes a while for historic realignments to occur. But I feel that a fresh wind of the Holy Spirit is coming through Illinois. I feel that we're in the midst of revival. It's the 250th anniversary of the Declaration, which says, all these truths are self-evident that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator, with certain inalienable rights. Among these is the right to life. And our founders believed that life began in the womb. The way common sense, women's experience, and the Bible all said. So I just said, I come from Texas, and there was a dramatic revolution in 1994, and then things began to choose. This is not a political statement, but the Democratic Party was the party of slavery and segregation, and it took a while to wipe those things out. Thank you for your help.
We've got one more question from the field, and then we will switch over to our panel.
All right, so this one says, what will you do for Christians and private school here in the state?
So I spent 17 years on the North Clay School Board of Education from 1995 to 2012. So I'm well versed in how public education operates. Cindy and I have had started 10 years ago Full Armor Christian Academy, so it goes all the way from preschool to high school, so I'm well versed on private education. Right now, today, you will hear our governor say that President Trump won't release over $8 million to our schools. You'll hear him continually say that. Well, that's not true. As a governor, he has to go and he has to apply for that money. And if anybody here has had anything to do with the school or state grant money, when you receive money, you have to account for it. So in order for our government to apply for this money, you have got to show where it's going. And you have got to show in years past where it has went. There's been no accountability, see, over the past 4 years under Biden. So J.B. Pritzker refuses to try to get that money that not only will help public school, but it will help underprivileged children, and it will help, it's all for private schools as well. So reining in accountability, pushing our property taxes down, giving local control back to our school boards, knowing that the school boards should, and communities should be able to decide how they want their children educated. No more state, get the state out of it completely. Parents, tax-paying parents, parents in general, you should be able to decide where you want your children educated at. If your local school is failing, then you should be able to go somewhere else. So definitely school choice would be a part of that, and just a whole welcoming in the voice of reason and understanding and working together. Because Illinois is a big and diverse state. And Cindy and I have seen it, much more so even than I guess we've realized in the past. And even the doors that have opened this year, it's amazing and it's awesome. And just shining that light wherever we go and making sure that, opening doors to Christian and counseling services, whatever it is, will certainly be explored. But as far as the schools are concerned, school choice and getting government out of government schools.
A popular demand of our panel that are going to take one more question from the field.
I want to just preface this question by saying that a lot of us downstaters can get very pessimistic about being able to make any change in Illinois because the larger population in Chicago, there are 2 counties in our state that normally decide all of our elections. I know there is a movement now about turning Chicago red, and that's a grassroots movement, it seems like. And I want to ask this question on the top of the question. Can you address how important our vote is, even downstate, even though Chicago has a preponderance of the population? Does it really matter? Because I run into that a lot as a pastor. It doesn't matter what we vote because Chicago is going to carry the state. So how do we combat that? And then the question that came from among us was, how can we then best support your campaign to ensure you are elected? So those 2 things.
I love that question. Don't let me forget that last part. I'll address that. So here's the deal. If you look at Cook County, every election, 30% turnout, 30. It's about all that they get. In Cook County, about 52% of the population, they work for the city, they work for the county, they work for the state, they work for the government, they're on disability. There's a lot of people there. So there's a lot of people, looking out for their interests, which I will contend are most of the people that are voting there. That's why it's 30.
Is that counting the dead people too? Are you?
Yes. Yeah. People tell me all the time, I won't go there. So yes, there is a movement in Chicago, and it is real. In these churches that we're attending, we were invited to churches all over Chicago. We were in them every Sunday. So far, since the primary, we've been in 2 services every Sunday, and it is a whole, and it's influential churches. Dr. Bill Winston's, just influential churches, and they're speaking up, and even in their services, they're talking about the burden of living here in this state. So there's a shift. Something that's taking place, and that's why Cindy and I have moved up there. That's why we're going to be up there most of the time, and our schedule is filling up just with curious people. But what we have to do, to your point, the young generation down here, it's almost like we like to rebel here in America, okay? And I like to rebel too, because my tenure in the state rep and as a state senate, I've pushed back against most of the nonsense. But what got us here is rebelling against government and taxes. And unfortunately, our younger COVID was a great experiment. And unfortunately, it worked because government is supposed to protect, but COVID told our younger generation, government can provide for you. And people liked it. Wow, I can stay home and the government will send me money. So our young generation, instead of standing up and fighting because they're not being taught true history in our schools, you forget your history, you have no idea where you're going, right? So they're not learning about what took place 75 years ago, what took place 150 years ago. They're not being taught that anymore. So instead, their way of rebellion is, I'm not voting. I'll show you. We have got to start. You will be shocked at the people you know that are not registered to vote. I promise you. You will be shocked at the people you know that did not vote on March 17th, do not wait until after November 3rd. Please start having that conversation. Load them up, take them to the DMV, the courthouse, wherever. Get them registered to vote. That is the only way. We can talk to we're blue in the face, but if people don't show up and do their due diligence, none of it's going to matter. So there is a true movement. And I just found out today that I'm at the top of the ballot. They have a lottery sometimes, and so when you get your ballot, I think my name is at least in Chicago. Maybe Chicago's different than the rest of the state, but in Chicago, Cook County, my name is going to be at the top of the ballot, and that's huge. Another reason and way that Governor Rauner and even before him George Ryan got elected was that people were frustrated with the way the state was going and their Democrat governors. So sometimes the people and this storm is brewing again, sometimes the people in Cook County and Chicago, they'll show up to vote and they're like, man, I can't vote for that Bailey guy because he's a Republican, but I'm not voting for Pritzker because he's making my life miserable. And sometimes they won't vote. That's called undervoting. So if we have 20, those are votes that would definitely have went to JB that might not go to him. So there's a whole lot of factors lining up to suggest that we will get elected. And finally, I've got some cards here and stuff. BaileyForIllinois.com, Blueprint for Illinois. So you're talking to some of your friends and like, man, I don't know, what's his plan? What's his plan? Well, go to BlueprintForIllinois.com and you'll see my plan. And interestingly enough, both of those websites will take you to we're here today because we got invited. And my scheduler over here, Lisa Tegler, she's here today, but she typically, it seems like 24/7, sits behind her computer because we're all the time getting invites. And when Cindy and I are going to be in an area, then she plugs us in. So there's a place that you can invite us to come to whatever. That's why we were at the daycare today. Maybe you want to sign up and be a volunteer for us and kind of get on the inside scoop in your county. Maybe you want to knock some doors, make phone calls. And Jessica French over here is our statewide coordinator. So when you say, I want to get involved, she's the one that's going to probably be reaching out to you or one of our county coordinators. And along with that, there's this other tab that says DONATE. Because here's the deal. We've got, that's donate, that means money. No laugh about that. Guys, here's the deal. We don't have to match Pritzker dollar for dollar. 4 years ago, I had a big donor give me $40 million, but it was managed by somebody else and it just wasn't spent right. $24 million is all we're saying we need to beat the hundreds of millions that this man will potentially spend. Because the grassroots game is here. What we've got to do, if you get on our social media, if you go to our Twitter account and X account, if you go to my Facebook really is where it's happening. And these press conferences, that's all free. But I know that some of you aren't on social media. And you need to see people ask, how come I'm not seeing your TV ads on TV? How come I'm not getting anything in the mail? Well, because it costs money. And we need, that's our budget, to get everyone, my parents, if I want to reach them other than them knowing me and they're going to vote for me, they're not on social media. And they need to be sitting at night watching Fox News and reminded closer to election that, oh yeah, I got to vote, I'm voting for Derek. So that's what makes the wheels go round. I am a farmer. I've learned from 4 years ago, and I promise you, there is no one more frugal with spending and getting the deals than us. So your money is going to be very frugally managed and spent in this campaign and for a victory as well. So thank you for asking that.
We're going to shift now. Go ahead and have a seat. And each of the panel has some direct questions on different topics that we've thought about over the last several weeks and months. So we're going to go into that now. Alan, you want to lead?
Okay. My topic, the first one is abortion access. Let me just clarify something. Earlier, I was introduced as the one who did argument in Dobbs, the reverse Roe v. Wade. I actually did 5 arguments in that case. They were all written, and I wasn't the one who did the oral argument in front of the case, because that's kind of what most people think about when you say argue the case. It was the Attorney General of Mississippi which passed the law, that got to argue to defend the states. But we filed 5 briefs one on behalf of 2,000 women hurt by abortion, one on behalf of the first known formerly frozen human embryo ever filed a brief at the Supreme Court. And that was because even Roe v. Wade said after viability, the states could ban abortion. And today we know that life begins at fertilization, absolutely. She was frozen for 2.5 years before placed in her adopted mother's home. And we represented the Jewish Pro-Life Federation. So many other groups too. So I just want to mention that. Most of the arguments are made in writing at the Supreme Court, and our work has been cited by the Supreme Court. In fact, I'll bring it back to women. When we first represented 180 women at the Supreme Court in a bill, in a case in which the federal government had banned partial birth abortion, a particularly gruesome method of abortion, the Supreme Court said for the first time that some women come to regret aborting the infant life they once created and sustained. See brief of 180 women hurt by abortion, page 22 to 24. It was just the testimonies of women. Now this is do you think abortion is health care? Do you think abortion is good for women? And what do you want to try to do to make it a more pro-life state?
Well, I am pro-life, 100%. Always have been, always was. It's what I ran on, it's what I've spoke against. But again, because of the super majority, I cannot legislate that in this circle. Simply cannot. So if we want to get elected, if we want to use the Matthew 10:16 approach and get in and build some community, and by that have communication, that's the only way that I'm going to get elected, guys, and that's the reality of it. Earning the trust and educating, it's the only way it's going to happen in Illinois. Otherwise, it's a non-starter. So I'm 100% on board with you, but as far as governing Illinois, I mean, we just passed the bill that allowed assisted suicide bill. Do you know that the majority of Illinois is okay with that? They are. And right now, that's where we're at with life issues. Coming alongside and supporting some of the groups, Juan Riesco in Chicago. I don't know if you're aware of him. We got some wonderful groups up there on the ground doing some amazing stuff. And just using the office to help educate, help people understand. Like I said, this is a mission field for Cindy and I. But I can't sit here and give you an honest opinion or honest answer and say that that's what I'm going to go to war with, because I can't. Otherwise, it's Bruce Rauner all over again. You just get shut out, and then we can't make the changes that we need to make. And we need to make those changes so that we can build community and trust and knock these walls down. Because right now, we are too divided in this state, and we are too divided in this nation, and it's getting dangerous.
Yes. Since I'm from Texas, I went to Lincoln's home yesterday, and we prayed against the Civil War. And I do pray that we do not have to have a civil war. As a lawyer, I might even mention that in the Torah, the Old Testament law, you were supposed to rebuke your neighbor, but not hate your countrymen. Meaning, if they're doing something that's wrong, then you should tell them that it's wrong. But you do that in compassion and love, and that you don't want to see the bad consequences of wrong decisions coming into their life. So you do that in compassion, and you don't hate your countrymen. And we have to pray for those in authority, both Democrat and Republican, so that we might lead quiet and godly lives. Do you mind if people pray for you?
I will accept that all day long. That prayer is the only thing that's going to ultimately change the course of this state and this nation.
That's a softball, but that's a command to all of us that we should be praying for the candidates. And regardless of who wins, I prayed for President Obama, President Biden. They weren't my choices, but those who don't like Trump should pay for him anyway, whatever. So it's kind of a nonpartisan forum, but anyway, the other question I wanted to ask you about, well, I might want to say that I can introduce you to women from Illinois who've had abortions, who can tell you their testimonies that you might want to share with the people of Illinois. Because abortion hurts people. That Supreme Court decision upholding the federal ban also said severe depression and loss of esteem can follow from abortion. And in that same decision, even Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, the majority is right. The majority had upheld the federal law and said abortion is a difficult and painful moral decision. And since we're in a church, Pastor, whose job is it to teach morality in America? It's the pastor's job to teach. That it's a difficult and painful moral. Justice Ginsburg said in dissent with 4 people, the court is surely right for that most women abortion is a difficult and painful decision. So why is it difficult and painful? It's not removing a wart. It's taking the life of a human being. And I'm not sure if you're aware that Missouri already has a safe haven law in which any woman can have the freedom of Roe v. Wade without killing the child and hurting herself. Most women don't have abortions to kill a baby. They're either lied to and sold it's not a baby, or they just think I can't take care of a baby. But your state has a safe haven law, which the woman can walk out of the hospital, leave the child behind, and if that, or up to 30 days in this state. And they don't have to end up in foster care either, because there's 1 to 2 million families every year waiting to adopt newborn children. Are you aware of those, and what do you think about that?
No, I certainly am. And in 2019, as a state representative on Memorial Day weekend at 2 a.m. in the morning on Sunday, that's when the full-term abortion bill was brought to committee. And that later on that evening is when it was passed. And I was on that committee, and I was mainly the front line debating against that. And it's a steamroller process in Illinois. They limit your debate, they limit the time, they limit the number of speakers, and all that is detrimental to the makeup of the House and of the Senate. And as governor, if I can convince people with safety, with affordability, with education, that their representatives are failing them, and we can get new people elected, that's the process in Illinois. In Illinois, those people in Missouri, they come here and they get their abortions paid for, and that's the environment that we have here.
And one of the things that you could do somewhat, other states like Missouri, which is near, and South Dakota, in this part of the country, have given women informed consent options. Even if you can't ban abortion totally, that forced abortion is illegal, even in Illinois. A voluntary abortion is legal, sadly. Shouldn't be, but it is. And then that safe haven is available to every woman, because it's not known that Missouri will pay all the expenses of low-income women who are pregnant, delivery, prenatal, delivery, and aftercare. And that abortion is the termination of the life of a separate, living, unique human being. That's been upheld in federal court when Planned Parenthood sued South Dakota for forcing them to tell women that truth. The federal court said it's true, it's not misleading, and it's relevant to a woman's decision as to whether to have an abortion. So, but I want to switch gears to sex and prostitution. A bill keeping sex workers safe act aims to decriminalize consensual sex work, treating sex workers as legitimate business owners with rights and protections. What are your thoughts about that?
That's nonsense. So that's
You can veto a bill like that, right?
yes.
Right. And one of the things we found is,
And just to be clear, for anything that would advance any of this agenda, I will veto all of that. I would never support it. I want to be very clear. I'm just suggesting that I need to, earn the trust on these 3 pillars. That's how we build a unity. So yeah, you don't ever have to worry about me signing on, passing the bill. They can try to override those all day long, and we'll deal with that when that happens. But anything that you guys, every one of you, stand for here, don't ever worry about me signing any of those bills, because that will not happen.
As the church, we have to recognize that information about sex workers is usually very, very skewed. We have to understand that the big majority of those people did not pick that trade. They're usually sex trafficked. So let's call it what it is. They're sex trafficking. I'm good friends with Troy Brewer. Some of you may know who Troy Brewer is. He rescued over 900 girls from sex trafficking last year. And right now he's praying for more funding to come in because I won't say the governmental entities or any of that, keep that anonymity. But he's working with government entities now that want to hand over to him over 1,500 teenage pregnant girls right now and not process them through the legal system. Why? Because the judges are simply going, well, we're going to send you back with your legal guardians. They are not their legal guardians, especially these trafficked girls across international borders. Those legal guardians are cartel that are putting them back into sex trafficking. So the judges release them back into sex trafficking, and they're gone. They can't find them anymore. They've disappeared. And so we have to understand that legalizing that is actually causing more abuse. This is not about people that make a choice to engage in voluntary acts. Most of them are sex trafficking. And so now he's taking in 1,500 women that otherwise would be sent back to a life being trafficked and abused. And so I think it's one of the most critical things that's happening right now is to make sure that the problem is the languaging, right? Oh, these are consensual acts. No, they're not. When you separate them from their predators, you find out they are not consensual acts in the majority of those cases. These were situations where they were either trafficked or that they were compelled against their better judgment to be pulled into that feeling like they had no hope or nowhere out. So I think that's so critical.
If I can interject on that as well. That's right. I know coming from the law enforcement side, I know our sex trafficking, child trafficking division within internal investigations and criminal investigations has broken at least 6 rings right here in Central Illinois since January. And we've had offenders from this town, Springfield, from Auburn, from Chatham, from Lovington, and we're talking places that were even involved with teachers and former law enforcement, current law enforcement, and deputies. So if you see something, say it again, and say it loud and say it proud.
And does Illinois already criminalize the men's part of this act? In other words, is it crime to buy prostitution? And because some states didn't do that, it was only the women that suffered. I represent thousands of women hurt by abortion, and sometimes they end up in sex trafficking or something because many of them begin to feel worthless and unable to make good decisions, and it can end up into a cycle of abuse. And the Bible says that sexual immorality wages war against the soul. It's one of the reasons the devil wants to promote sexual immorality everywhere, because it doesn't just paint your body, it can lose your soul in eternity forever. And it's one reason that I believe that the devil wants to promote sexual immorality in schools, and sexual pleasure rights for children is on the left's agenda, so that you can start having sex when you're in the 3rd grade or 6-year-old. And obviously, those things should be outlawed everywhere. They are criminal, both based on scientific research and the Word of God.
Let me interject one more thing on this. If you think that the women or the men are the only ones that suffer out of this, think again. Secondary victimization is huge. I work with the guys that prosecute these cases. I work with the guys that make the arrest on them. I work with the guys that actually write up the charges and submit this to the courts. And what these guys see is unthinkable. And it stays with them for years. And that has an effect on their family, on their marriage, and on their livelihood and their children. Because there's all too many times, as we know, you see something that takes place and you work it over and over, and you bring it home to your kids and spread it all over the table. This is where the Christian spirit comes in. It's where we can put our foot down and say, no, not here, not in my house, not in my marriage, and not with my family. And at that point, you can be an encourager to anybody else. And it's a thing to where if you value your marriage, your livelihood, and that of your kids, talk to them about this stuff. Don't be silent any longer.
So let me say this, as an Oklahoma pastor, I want to say why I'm here on this panel. First of all, I just want to say to Alan, I appreciate everything that you've done to protect life. And I like Alan even more now because I found out that he graduated from Oklahoma University. So he's great people now. So I appreciate that. But one of the reasons why I'm sitting on this panel is because for some reason, God felt it appropriate to open doors that I never asked for nor desired, nor do I want them, to be frank with you. And I think God sometimes opens those doors because I'll say things that don't help me, that don't make me popular, and don't gain favor with political people. And for some reason, God keeps giving me favor, even though I say things unfavorably. And I've had the privilege of having conversations and relationships with several gubernatorial candidates in multiple states. Jayon in California, Jake Merrick, who's a spirit-filled believer, leading the way in Oklahoma to be governor in relationship with our current governor. And one of the great things is that we have a tongue-talking, prophesying governor in our state of Oklahoma. And what I've said before is that we're not giving back mountains we've already claimed. We're not giving back territory we've already taken a hold of. We're not trying to take a mountain. We own a mountain, and we're just going to hold it. But one of the things I want to talk to you about is something that's important to me that you can speak into, something that I've had conversations with these other candidates about as they lead the way there. Something that affects me that I actually think is maybe not as flashy or as glamorous, but I think matters more than almost every one of these subjects. And so I'll tell you a little bit about my story. I blew up as a pastor in social media in 2020, and I took a media mount. And I'm regarded as somebody that changed the way that prayer is done by doing it online and seeing people impacted all around the world and setting a model that's now used today in the church. But something happened to me. Social media companies didn't like me preaching the gospel. And so even though I have 300, 400,000 social media followers, they decided that preaching the gospel was against their community guidelines, and they literally say on my Facebook, we are not showing your feed in the organic reaches because you have violated community guidelines. Even though I ran ads and paid those companies money to promote my content, which helped gain those followers, right? So I bought a product that they removed from me and stole from me, right? That's a legal issue. But what I've noticed is this, and I've talked to those governors about that, is that there seems to not be an importance, and I don't mean in talk or rhetoric, but I mean in action. There seems to not be an importance, and I'll get to the question, about protecting the First Amendment rights. And here's what I want to say. Some of you guys are not on social media. Your children are. Your grandchildren are. And the entire world for the next generation is. It has become the town square. It is the place where people go to have their voice heard in our society. It is absolutely the town square. And so what I've talked to several of those governors about is how do we protect the freedom of speech? Our founders thought that that was the most important subject, that if we don't have freedom of speech, we actually will erode every other freedom if we're not able to have communication about that freedom of speech. So in my case, my freedom of speech was completely taken away from me in some regards. And so what you end up finding is this, is that if I don't have the freedom to share my faith, and this is what I'll say, a lot of atheists, or a lot of other proponents against this would say that they're scared of a faith-filled governor because they're scared that you'll mandate Christianity, right? That everything will come out of the lens of forced morality, right? Legalized, everything will be forced morality on their faith. What I found, though, is actually quite different. In Christianity, a strong believer that stands on their conviction actually allows more freedom than any other demographic group in the world. Atheists want Christian silence. Muslims want Christian silence. Only Christians say, let people choose. It's only Christians that really actually protect the right of others to choose God for themselves. And so we're actually the best at freedom of speech. But in my case, what I proposed to them, and I'd like to know your thoughts on this, is why don't we start treating some of these companies, and the kickback has been, well, this is a federal issue. No, it can be done at the state level. If the state simply, if a governor will say, I'm going to stand up for the rights of my citizens, I can't do anything nationally, but I can stand up for the rights of my citizens, that social media companies in that state, if they wish to conduct business in the state, should be held to either one of two categories. Are you a news outlet? And if you're a news outlet, then everything you say is now what you've published. So everything written on Facebook, everything written on Instagram, that is a published act. If you're going to control what gets published, then you're responsible and liable for what gets published. If you don't wish to assume the liability of it, then you must allow people to express themselves in any way which is not illegal speech, right? Express themselves on that. If you're going to edit what is put on there, then you become an editor. You become an editorial press. And so that seems to me a reasonable expectation to say my freedom of speech is protected because they're not allowed to edit that unless they want to fall into the category of being considered a press. And if that's the case, then they're liable for your post. If you make a post, they're liable. Otherwise, if they want to remove the liability, they also can't remove the person's ability to speak on their own platform that they're given. That's what I've suggested. But I feel like if we can't have it, and this is why it's frustrating for me, you can speak into this. This is why it's frustrating. Because Republicans, in general, although they hold this value, don't seem to take it as a priority. And what's happening is all of these corporations, like we talked about earlier about left-leaning news outlets, well, if the social media is left-leaning, it means they get to silence the voices of the Republicans. People never hear these conversations. It never gets out. And if we lose that, then they don't have to have the better platform if they're the only voice that's heard. That, to me, is the most dangerous thing to a democracy, to a republic ever, is for one half of society to not allow their case to be heard. What do you think about any of that?
Well, I appreciate that, and I completely understand and agree with that. I will say that here within my reach, I mean, that's actually what brought us to the forefront during the COVID lockdowns. It was Cindy's idea after 2 weeks to flatten the curve, April 1st of 2020, to get on Facebook and start having morning devotions and prayers as a sitting state representative. And actually, that's what literally propelled us. Because, okay, so I have never faced suppression. I haven't, but I understand and respect what you're saying. And yes, I think that the laws within, I think that's something that needs to be spoken. It's interesting, as a side note, that J.B. Pritzker owns a fair share of Facebook. Keep that in mind. A lot of people don't know that, so one of his blind trusts. So sometimes in some of these organizations, we have to consider, who owns them. But I'm right now, today, one of your first questions, I mean, I'm seeing, by being in the favor of God, I'm seeing a fair connection with our media here. It's crazy, and
that's amazing. But how do you protect that? Where it's not just, well, thank you that they're doing it out of the goodness of their heart. What about when their heart is not so good?
Nope, I get it. That's got to be explored, because as some of your people have said, through the federal community, the FCC, that's where a lot of that legislation is drawn. But can we do something? And I had not thought about that, and would love to chat with you later about that. So thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Bailey, I have a perspective from a pastor. I pastored this church 48 years. We pioneered it 48 years ago. And the way you stayed in church 48 years is nobody else wants me, and I don't let them vote on me, so I'm still here. So that's how I stayed 48 years. But we've seen so many things happen in the state of Illinois, really pushing overreach against the church. We used to have a daycare center, which was a great blessing to our community. We had before and after school. The state came in and said, you can no longer operate a daycare center within your church building if there are other people in the building during the time you're running your daycare. You have to have a building that is exclusively used just for daycare, set aside. Well, it's impossible. We have staff here, we have funeral dinners, we have Bible studies, and for many years it was a great ministry. We saw people come to the Lord, and finally they came in and said, "No, you don't get a license, you can't," and we had to give that up because of the state. Then we were told in 2020 that the church is not essential. You don't need to meet, you can't meet, and of course everybody went online to try to do that. Finally, just 5 weeks into that whole thing, 7,000 churches came together on Pentecost Sunday and said, we're going to defy these orders, and we're going to open up church, at least in our parking lot. And that's what we did. And because Liberty Counsel got behind the churches and said, if you get litigated, we'll fight your case. So we want to thank God for Christian lawyers. And Liberty Counsel is an amazing ministry. And then also, President Trump said, go ahead and open your church. We'll stand behind you if your governor comes after you. And that made us once again, and I was so upset because I went to see parishioners who were dying, and they would not let me in to pray with them. It's criminal. It's criminal what they did. It's like we were being run by the Gestapo. Just this week, I went to see a young man who's been part of our church in jail, in our county jail. They said, and I've been doing this for decades, showing my ordination card, and I need to be able to talk to him. Oh, we have new policies now. You have to be approved by our chaplain. I said, my gosh, I've been pastoring 48 years. I've been in that jail dozens and dozens of times. Here's my ordination card. No, he has to approve of you, and it all has to be done on Zoom now. You know, so I call, Kent Chaplain doesn't call back for 3 days, 4 days. Finally, I called his superior officer, didn't get a return from him either. Ready to go to the county board. I'm ready to do whatever. There's so much government overreach in Illinois. I call it the People's Republic of Illinois. This is the People's Republic of Illinois. It has so changed. We used to have an academy here. We had our own private school. I'm getting very emotional about this. We had to shut it down because we could not compete with what we could charge, because our people, property taxes went up higher for the public schools. So now they're paying two taxes. They have to pay taxes to support public schools, which are very inferior, unfortunately, in our city. That's why we have a hard time attracting people to Decatur, because of our public schools. Not putting our teachers down. I thank God for the teachers that are hanging in there. We've got a lot of good Christian teachers, and they're trying to do their best. But then, if you're in a private school, you have to charge another $4,000, $4,500, $5,000. It keeps going up. And so they're paying that much in taxes or more, and then they have to pay that to a private school. In Arkansas, they have changed the law. The governor there, of course, Sarah Huckabee, they've changed the law that you can actually take your tax dollars and you can apply that to the school of your choice, which Christian schools would explode. They would explode, because if we had that money, then we've got the monies that we need, and people aren't paying a double tax. Most of the kids that went to our school went because Grandma and Grandpa paid, because Mom and Dad were already paying their taxes. And after 10 years, we had to pick up the slack out of the church, and subsidize the school so much that it became just economically impossible for us to do that. And one of the great hurts in my heart is we had to do that because the state is stacked against us. They wanted to close down our daycare, and they did, for no good reason other than now they can open theirs and get taxes. We weren't paying taxes to them. That's what it's all about. But these others, ones that are subsidized by the state, they're paying their taxes. And I don't know if it's a large issue, but I'm just telling you from a clergyman's, we pray for our state, we pray for our all those who are in governance, as the Bible tells us to do that. But we are really tired of getting shoved around by this state, and I hope you can do something about it. We're tired of it, we really are.
I appreciate that. I'm going to preach just for a few minutes. If some of you off, I'm sorry, but thank you for that. We're celebrating our 250th anniversary this year. Why are we celebrating it? We're celebrating it because 250 years ago, people like us got ticked off at the same things we're ticked off today, and they had this giant standing in front of them called England, greatest army on the face of this earth. But they decided they'd had enough. There was sacrifice, loss of life, family, business, homes. They sacrificed. Clergy stood up here with pistols. You've heard of the Black Robe Regiment. The men, when they walked in, sat on one side. Women sat on the other. Men stacked their muskets, knowing that the English army could be coming. So, here's what I want to say, and I want to take some risk at this. If you are from Illinois, and you're a voter here, and you don't know who I am or what I stand for, you are part of the problem. You know, 4 years ago, I ran. I stood. I've served as a state rep. I've served as a state senator. I've stood for all of this that we're talking about. So, the fact that the church overall is silent is part of the problem. Separation of church and state, part of the problem. Until we start stepping out of our comfort zone. John F. Kennedy said it, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And we want to depend on a president, we want to depend on the governor, we want to be frustrated at a president, we want to be frustrated at a governor. Guys, it's us. You want change? It's us. How many school board members do we have here today? School board members. Anybody on the school board? Guys, that's a problem. You want to change your local school and have a conversation and sit on a school board and say, we're not raising property taxes, I'm done with that. That's how it happens. How many precinct committee people we got here today? Precinct committee people. Guys, that's it right here, my team. Thank you. God bless you. Listen, guys, that's a problem. Every county has a Republican Party. Every county has a Democrat Party. You're elected to be a precinct committee person, so you know when you show up to vote, that's your precinct. Somebody is in charge of that precinct. And it's an elected position. It's their responsibility, and it's a grassroots constitutional republic foundational position that our founding fathers set up to say, this is how this is going to be. It's all communication, it's networking, it's people getting out and educating. Those elections just took place. Did you find out, whatever your county you're from, where your county Republican group meets, who the chair is, and get connected with them. Say, I want to be appointed to a precinct. And then come election time, they're going to give you this paper of all the voters in your precinct, and you're going to be able to see your neighbors. Did they, for the last 4 elections, did they vote in the primary? What ticket did they pull, and did they vote in the general? And it is the responsibility of the precinct committee person to get out there and do that work. And if we're not doing it, then of course this is going to mushroom into the problem that we've got. And we have got the biggest problem here in Illinois than any state in the nation, because we've got the greatest state of any nation. We've got the Great Lakes, we've got Chicago, we've got the rivers, we've got the rails, we've got the roads, and it's all being abused and taken from us. And if all we're going to do is stand and complain and think about, well, why aren't my elected officials not doing what they should be doing? They're not doing what they should be doing because you're not holding them accountable. So, guys, this is the answer. When you leave these doors today, I hope Sunday morning you're as fired up to get out there and share the word of Jesus. But I hope today when you walk out these doors, you're fired up to get involved in government, to call your state rep, to call your state senator, to call your relative or your family member in Chicago or in somewhere else, and to ask them, hey, what's going on up there? How are you feeling? What's the political climate look like? And honestly, they're going to tell you the same thing you're thinking. Until we engage as a church, as void card holders, as school board members, as homeschoolers, as whatever, until we engage in government, we're going to be spinning our wheels, because statistics prove that 60% of the people sitting in this crowd right now did not vote in the last 4 years. That's the cold, hard facts. So when you get out there today, start asking your friends, are you registered to vote? Did you vote? Cindy and I have heard just recently from some wonderful, more than one, wonderful friends, staunch supporters, even monetarily supporters, just in passing. And I forgot to vote on March 17th. Guys, it is that important to our future and to this republic. And I'm just, because that's what I did. I got ticked off. I've been on the sidelines. I got ticked off and complained, and then people held me account, so I ran for government. And now we've got a problem, because this has been going on for about 50 years here in Illinois. And we've got a lot to do. And until we enact my philosophy is Matthew 10:16. Jesus said, I'm sending you out as sheep among the wolves. Be as shrewd as vipers and innocent as doves. Let's get in there. Let's get elected. Let's love everyone in this state. But then we've got work to do to get some of this stuff turned around. But we've got to be shrewd about how we do that. So that's my plea to you guys. We, not I, we can do this. And it's up to you, not just me. So thank you.
I appreciate that very much. So the Bible tells us, I'm one of those pastors that had to repent from not being involved in anything political. I didn't want politics in my pulpit. And not just the government coming in and overreaching, 501c3 and all of that nonsense, but the idea that I wasn't involved politically, and I said, well, politics in my pulpit. God had to correct my heart through a series of events. So when I say that I didn't want anything to do with that, I'll explain that story more, but I don't want to I want to hear a little bit more from you. So I'll explain that once you're done. I know you have a time limit. But you guys need to understand one thing. The Bible says that we are called to be priests and what? Priests and that is both in the church and in the political sphere. Kings represent kingdoms. And so you are called to bring the kingdom of God everywhere. I'll talk about that more later. So if you are not involved with kingdom citizens, people who say, I'm a kingdom citizen, and involved in bringing the kingdom of God into the earth, and involved in those processes where holiness and righteousness are upheld, then you are not a priest and a king. In order to live out your faith, you must be involved in the political sphere in some way. You must vote. This is not an option to say, well, I want to stay out of the system. The system is broken because the church stays home. The system is broken because the church believed a lie and misunderstood scripture that said, be separated and come out from amongst them. That is not how the first 3 centuries of church went. They overtook the greatest authority in the world, Rome. And they didn't do it through military might. They didn't do it through protest. They did it by taking over areas of government and transforming governmental figures into Christian figures, into people that obeyed God first. In fact, it's all throughout the Bible. And so it's so important that you guys are a part of that. The problem, I think, has been that most Christians, we see our political figures, and all of them must say, I'm a Christian in order to get elected. Let's be honest. There's very few that openly say they are not Christian and have a hope of being elected. We've seen that. Now, things have changed slightly, but for most of our country, if you didn't profess Christ, you weren't winning office. So a lot of our politicians, they are Christians in name only. They are Christians because when they come into places like this, it suits them to say, well, my Christian faith. In other words, I go to church and check it off a box. As I understand, I don't know much about you. I do know the other candidates. One of the things I told Jake Barrett was exactly what I said earlier. We're not giving back the ground we've taken. And we're going to have a spirit-filled believer, someone who actually believes God is still moving on the earth today and is actively engaged in our lives and cares about us as a good father would. He didn't leave us a book and say, read that, I'm not a very good father. Right? You would not call your father good if all he ever told you was read the manual he left for you. And so we want to own those mountains, and that's what this conference is about, is owning those mountains. And so I understand, someone told me that you have an amazing testimony. And I would like them to understand, because I think the disconnect happens when they think all the politicians are just out for themselves. They just want to gain power, right? Power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And so I understand that you have a story about your faith, and I think for most people, they want to know that when you get into office, and you guys can tell me, shout me down if I'm wrong, that when you get into office, you're not beholden to the powers of the state, but the powers of heaven. And that you'll be accountable, that you are a man who fears God before you fear voters. I would like to know that he will come against me as a pastor and say, I don't agree with you, pastor, because that doesn't hold true to my faith. I appreciate that you have a problem, right? But that is not true of what God is saying to me. I would rather him push back against me because he's a man of principle and character versus trying to appease and get a vote. And so I would like to hear from you as a pastor, and I think the rest of them, a little bit more about your faith story, a little bit about those convictions and how your faith dictates how your policy and how you'll govern the state.
I need to interject here for just a second. Your schedule has changed. So we're going to need about 5 minutes, and then we're going to have to wind things down because we want to pray for you before you leave.
Cindy, come up here with me. Again, if you know anything about me and you've been following, watching the headlines, watching TV over the last 8 years that I've been, you know that I have been on the front line, sticking my neck out time and time again, standing against all of this nonsense in Illinois. And that is the only reason why I don't want to run for governor. I want to be home with my boys right now farming. We want to be with our grandkids. But God opened the door. We felt the calling. That's why we're here. Obedience. And each and every one of you here today have a calling on your life right now. You're being challenged. Should I do this or not? If it's a calling from God, get off of your seat and do it. So, just quickly, this is the way God works. My dad was the school board president in 1980 when I was in 8th grade, and her dad was a math teacher an hour away, and our high school needed a high school principal. And so, interestingly enough, her dad applied, he was hired, and that summer we met at Oilville Christian Service Camp in Florida. We locked eyes, and we've been together ever since, and it's been amazing. 4 children, 13 grandchildren, one on the way. God's been good in our life, and every time He opened the door, our youth minister at our church had to leave and get another job. She was on the school board, and out of the blue, the school board called, and she answered the phone in those days, and they wanted to know if I would fill that position right on the school board. And I told her, I said, well, they called and you answered the phone, you do it. And just being an officer, she said, no, Derek, you need to do this because I'm too busy working. I mean, that's what I tell our young people all the time. The most important decision you'll ever make in your life is choosing your Lord and Savior. The second most decision you'll have in your life is who you spend the rest of your life with, because I would be nothing without that. So, I'm getting dragged to lose track here. I wanted to tell something, and I'm going to let her fill in the blanks. But, you know, for instance, I remember the first time in our church I served as a deacon, and I was asked to be an elder, and I sat in on that first meeting as a church elder, and I was the youngest person there, and the men around me said, now there's going to be some things in this church, some issues that we deal with that you can't repeat to anyone, not even your wife, and just how this is. And I said, well, I actually stood up, and I said, I desire the role of elder, but I said, I've got a prayer partner at home, and we're one. So if I can't share with her, I don't need to be a part of this program. So they accepted me, and the rest is history. We've just had an amazing life. God opened the door to be on the school board. God opened the door to be a part of church leadership. He just blessed our farm and our family. And so it was whenever I got that call from people that said, hey, you need to run for state rep. And I said no. I said no at every juncture. I had her here to say yes. And real quick, I'll tell one quick story, then I'll let her. As to these 7 mountains, I'll never forget, we were up in closed session dealing with a discipline issue. And the lady that was the principal of our high school was also my fellow elder's wife, and she was a Sunday school teacher. And she's talking about this one young person that was just having some terrible issues, and she had this person in her office, and kind of needed to expel this person because they just couldn't get it figured out. And I looked at her and I said, "You got the kid in Sunday school. Why can't you talk some reason into this? Why can't you use why aren't you dealing with it on that end?" And that's the first time ever I was not, or that's been 30 years ago. I wasn't aware of the 7 mountains, but that is the first time. I've always called it compartmentalization of life, because that's the first time she said, "Well, Darren, she was also a Democrat, but she said, I'm a principal today, and on Sunday, I'm a Sunday school teacher. And when I go home, I'm a housewife and a mom, and I kind of figure that out. And I'm not going to let my personal beliefs come in here." And I said, "Oh my gosh, that's our problem. Stop it." Anyway, needless to say, she served another year as a principal. We found someone else, but that's our problem in life, guys. And that's the whole 7 mountains. What we as believers, we're Christians, and we that's how we live our life. We don't come. I'm not different when I'm in Chicago. I'm not different when I'm at home. I'm that same person, and His Word guides everything that I do and everything that I say. I'm gonna let Cindy fill in some blanks.
Thank you for having us here today. We are just honored. Thank you for all of the work that you are doing as people of influence, hosting a conference just to elevate this message, Church on Fire. We can change the world. 12 men set out to do it. So I never get discouraged when our numbers are low, because I always go back to them. And we stand on the foundation of our faith. Our family has been tested in that these past 6 months. It's the hardest thing that we've ever gone through. But the greatest hope that we've always stood on is what allows us to keep moving forward today. It's because we know that we are going to be reunited with our son and precious daughter-in-law, our two precious grandchildren. The hundreds of people that went through the funeral line with our family to extend their condolences. It didn't matter if they were black, if they were white, if they were Democrats, or they were Republicans. They came to express the heartfelt condolences to our family. It was the most humbling experience that I've ever had in all the 60 years of my lifetime. Darren and I cannot begin to express our gratitude, to continue to share the message of hope through tragedy, knowing that our mission here on this side is to love God and love other people. It's very simple. And just applying as part of the ecclesia to be an influencer in our communities, and first of all in our homes, in our communities. And if God opens doors for that platform to be larger through state, through nation, world, the challenge is to step into that and do that. And God is faithful through it. And we just want to be ambassadors for Him to shine a light in a world that is looking for answers, and we know what the answers are. We are honored to be elected by the people to serve in this position, and are so excited about all the amazing people we've met, all the amazing people that live in this state that we call home, and just excited about the ideas and the great things that are taking place in this state, and just really giving fire to those things and being able to come up with solutions and to help people thrive. That's our heart, that's our goal as part of the ecclesia, and believe that's what we're called to do. So we thank you again so much for allowing us to talk to you today, and God bless each and every one of you that are here as you continue in the rest of your conference. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here. Mr. and Mrs. Bailiff, I can have you step out here. We'd like to send you off in prayer, if you could, please.